So today I wanted to teach you how to create a pagination system inside PHP, which is basically when you have a bunch of something, for example, a bunch of products or a bunch of images or videos or something, and you have so many of them that you need to do something in order to not have them all shown inside one page. So a pagination system basically allows for you to have however many products you want inside a page, and if there's so many, then you can swap to page 2, 3, 4, so on, until you've seen all the different products or images or whatever you might want to show inside your website, right? So basically you can go through tabs in order to see all the different products. And a pagination system isn't very difficult to make, but it does require that you know how to make it, right? So this is why I'm here, to just kind of show how you can create a basic pagination system. And just to kind of show what I have inside my example here, I have a database called pagination_db. And inside this one, I have a products table that basically just have a bunch of products inside of it. So this is just to kind of show that you can use a database if you want to. But you could also, if you had a bunch of images inside your website folder, show those instead. You don't have to use a database. Basically, this pagination system here is just to give you something to start with, and then you can build it in however you might want to build it. You know, if you have images, videos, a database, in this example here, you can customize this in any sort of way you want. So to begin with, I'm going to go back inside this tab here, because this is actually my raw starting point for this tutorial here, just to kind of show what this is. Inside my index.php file, I just have the basic setup that I need to have in order to have a web page. But inside my body tag, I did actually include a h2 element, a table with a table row inside of it with a couple of headers, just so we know exactly what is going to be shown inside my table here. So for example, the ID, name, and price of my products. And then you can see I just added in 3 separate table rows with just product ID, product name, product price. You know, we could also just have one. So, you know, to make this a lot less complex, this is basically what I have inside my body tag, right? So if I save this, go back inside my website, you can see now I just have one product. So this is just a starting point for this tutorial here. So you can go ahead, create this here, copy it down, and then we can get started. Now, specifically for this tutorial here, we're going to be using a database. And again, after we're done with the tutorial, we can customize it in any other sort of way you might want to. But to begin with, we're going to do this using a database, which means that we need to have a connection to our database from our website. And the basic way you do that, if you've never done that before, is you create a new file, and you can call this file anything. You can, in this case, I'm just going to call mine dbh.php, because that stands for database handler. So basically this just handles the connection to the database. Inside this file, I am going to create a basic connection. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to include 4 different variables. So again, we need to open the PHP tags here, because otherwise you can't write any sort of PHP. And inside the PHP tags, we're going to add 4 different variables. The first one is going to be the host name, database name, username, and password. And basically what we're doing here is we're just adding the information to our database that we have connected using, in my case here, XAMPP. If you don't know how to use XAMPP, I do have a basic tutorial on how to use it and how to set it up, so you can actually get a server started with a database connection. I'll link it somewhere here. There's going to be like an overlay or something, right? But basically, this is going to allow for us to connect to our database, because we need this information to do so. For a clean XAMPP installation, this is the information you need to have. So again, the database host is going to be localhost. Database name is going to be whatever you might call your database. We'll talk about how to set up the database in just a second. And then you're going to have a username set to root and a password set to nothing. And I do also have a tutorial on how to actually change these different, like the username and the password. So if you want to change that inside your database, so you can actually write a custom username and password for your local database, I'll have a video for that too. It'll be linked below in the description or something, or here on screen, so you can actually click it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and actually open up a connection to our database using this information here. So we're going to run a try catch block. Basically, it's going to be a try with a pair of curly brackets, and then we have some code in between here. So it's going to try to run this code, and if it catches a error, then it's going to display a error inside this block down here. So inside the parentheses of the catch block, we're going to set a PDO exception because we're going to use a PDO connection to our database. So you can see we have PDO exception popping up there. And basically, we're just going to say that we're going to reference to a variable E for exception if we do actually encounter any sort of errors when it comes to connecting to our database. So we're going to try this block of code. If we catch a error, then we're going to run this code down here. Now, our database connection is going to look something like this to begin with. Now, I'm just going to wrap it down to 2 lines so you can actually see what is going on. But basically, we have a variable called con for connection, and we set it equal to a new PDO connection, which is a object inside object-oriented PHP. It's not really important to know right now what exactly that means, but basically, we're just creating a new connection to our database. So here inside the parentheses, you can see that I have, it's going to look like this, but I do have some data inside the parentheses here. And because it's so long, it's wrapping down to 2 lines. So the first one is going to be inside double quotes, and it's going to have this information here. Basically, we're saying we want to set up a MySQL connection because we're using a MySQL database. And the host name is going to be set equal to variable host, which I set up here. So that is going to be localhost in our case here. You could also just write localhost down here instead, but because we want to have it a little bit more neat and tidy, we're going to create the variables up here instead and just reference to those because it looks better inside PHP. The next thing is going to be our database name, and you can see actually separated with a semicolon, and the database name is going to be equal to variable db name, which is again up here. Again, you can call this whatever you want. If you have maybe just a name for your website or something, in this case, because it is a pagination tutorial, I called mine pagination_db. But really, this could also be the name of your website, whatever database name you have for this particular site that you're running, right? The next thing I added in is character set, which is equal to UTF-8, which is just something standard you need to put in. The next thing after the comma, which separates this first parameter. So we go down to the second parameter, which is going to be the username for your database. And the last parameter is going to be the password. And with these 3 different parameters, you now have a variable that is going to actually create a connection to your database. So what we can do now is we can actually go ahead and set a attribute for this particular variable. So we're going to say variable con, and we're going to point to a method called set attribute. And inside set attribute, we have a couple of attributes set to certain things. So in this case here, we say that we have a PDO, and I want to point to a static method called attribute_error mode. And the same thing goes with over here. I want to set it to error mode_exception. So we can actually run this exception down here inside the catch block. So if we do actually get some sort of error message with this connection here, let's say it fails or something needs to happen, which goes inside this catch block. And we're going to basically just say we want to kill off whatever code we're running here. We're going to run a die method, which is basically just going to give us a error message, which is going to be connection failed. And it's going to tell us what kind of error actually happened. So it's going to get our exception message in this case here. And with this, we now have a basic connection to our database. It's really this simple here. So whenever we want to connect to our database, we just reference to variable con and use that one in order to point to our database connection. So we can actually start doing things inside our database. So with this file, we are now done with the database connection. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start creating the actual pagination system, because this was just in order to get stuff showing inside our website. Because like I said, I already inside my database here have some actual products that I want to show inside my website. Now, you don't have anything right now inside this database here. So what you're going to do is after you install XAMPP and you have your phpMyAdmin open, which again, I show inside that tutorial. You're going to go inside, we have the front page, go to databases, then you're going to go below here. You're going to create some sort of database name. In my case here, I call mine Pagination_DB, and then you're going to click create. Once you do that, you now have your database over here on the left side. You're going to click it. And then you can see right now, at least for you, you have nothing inside your database. Now I have a table called products. And the way you create that one is after you click Pagination_DB, you're going to go to SQL. And then you can write some SQL code here in order to create tables and other things inside this database, delete things, insert things, drop the table, or whatever you might want to do. And I do actually have some code here, and I will show it to you in order to actually create the exact same thing that I have inside my database. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to create the table, which looks like this. So this is the code that you need to run in order to actually get the actual table created. Basically, we're saying here we want to create a table called products. And inside this table, we need to have some actual columns that has certain data inside of it. So we have one column, which is the ID. We have one that's the name. And then we have one that's the price. And then, you have these 3 different columns where you can insert information about a product. Do keep in mind that I do not have a comma at the end of the last one, because otherwise you might get an error message. So after you paste this in, you're going to go down and it's going to say, if I zoom out again, it's going to say go down here at the bottom. So you're going to click it and it should actually create the table inside Pagination_DB. Now, once you do that, you're going to go back again. Yeah, I'm not going to save my changes here. I'm going to go back again to Pagination_DB, go to SQL, and then you want to make sure you paste in an actual product. Now, I have a bunch of products here. And again, I'm going to paste them in so you can actually see them. I will go ahead and delete a bunch of these just so you don't get overwhelmed by what I have here. Basically, this is a insert statement that says I want to insert into a table called products that has columns called name and price. Now, I know there's also a ID column, but just go ahead and ignore that one because that one is actually set to auto increment, which basically means that it is automatically going to fill in a new ID for each product whenever you create one. So you don't need to do anything with that one. You're just going to go ahead and fill in information when it comes to name and price. And then you want to insert some values. So in this case here, I have product number 1, and then I have a price for that particular product. Then I have product number 2 and a price for that particular product. And then you can just go ahead and copy paste this again and again and again until you have a bunch of products. So you can decide how many you might want inside this database here. And once you're done, you're going to scroll down, you're going to click go. Again, if you want more products than just these, let's say you create 3 products and you realize, oh, okay, maybe I needed like 20 products just to make this tutorial a little bit more exciting. You can just go ahead and copy paste this again, paste it in the exact same spot. Make sure you click Pagination_DB first. And then you can just go ahead and add more if you wanted to. So I can just say I want to copy this. Let's actually go and copy this properly, like so, comma, paste it in, and then make sure the last one does not have a comma, right? So you just paste in as many products as you want, change the product name, the price, and then you can just click go again, and it's going to insert those as well inside your products table. So that is just basically how you can keep creating new products, and it's really that simple. So now you should have a products table, and inside the products table, you should have a bunch of products that has an ID, a name, and a price. Because remember, the ID is auto inserted as you create the product. Again, I know some people might know how to set this up, so this is more or less just a skip part of this video here. But some people, they'll watch this and they'll be like, oh, I've never set up a database before. So I'll have to show you how to do so and actually get through this. Again, I have an entire PHP course that shows how to do stuff like this. So if you're interested, I have that. But for now, this is just like a very quick run through of how to set this up. So going back inside our website and then inside our editor, now we have a database with actual products. So our database part of this tutorial is technically done because we have a connection now and we have actual products inside our database that we can actually pull out and show inside the website. So in order to create the pagination system, we're going to go back inside our website root folder. We're going to create a new file. I'm going to call this one pagination.php, just to give it some sort of name here. Inside pagination.php, the first thing we're going to insert is, of course, our PHP opening tags. Now, we're not going to include closing tags, which you may have noticed that we also did not do inside our DBH file, because if you do that and then create something, let's say some HTML, I don't know, like a paragraph or something below here, it might give you some error messages and stuff. So it's very important that if you only have PHP inside a particular page, just do not have the closing tags, because it can give you error messages and stuff like that. So don't do that. The first thing we need to do inside our PHP tags here is include a results per page variable that is going to tell our website how many products do I want to have shown inside each of these pagination pages that we're going to create. This number here, you can change to however many you might want to have. So in my case here, I have 5. Could also be 8 or 10, depending on what you might want to have. Let's make it fun. Let's make it something like, I don't know. Let's just make it 8 to have something. And the next thing I want to do here is I want to actually figure out how many products do I actually have inside my database, because we need that number in order to calculate how to create this pagination system here, because we need to divide it by how many results we want to show to figure out how many tabs do we need for our pagination system. So what I'm going to do here is, first of all, I'm going to go in and actually run or create a SQL statement. This is going to be something we run inside our database in order to grab the data and do something with it. So in this case, I want to just sort of count how many products do we have. We're selecting all the IDs from our products table, and we want to grab the count to count how many IDs we actually get from our database table. And I want to create a reference called total that I can use later on to grab this number here. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to run this SQL statement inside our database, because we need to actually run this to get some data from our database. We're going to do this using a prepared statement, because you should always do that in order to make this a safe, or at least safer way to grab data inside your database. So we're going to create a variable called statement. I'm going to set it equal to variable con. And where do we have that from? We have that from inside our dbh.php file, because it's right down here. We're grabbing our connection, and then I want to run a method from within that connection, because this is an object called prepare, and I want to just tell it what SQL statement to run inside this connection here. So in this case, we grab the connection to our database, and then we run this SQL statement. Now, we don't actually run the connection yet, because we do need to do that below. Right now, we're just preparing the SQL statement to be run, and then we go below, and then we actually say, okay, so now that we have this statement that has this SQL query, now I actually want to execute it and run it inside the database. So once we do that, we now need to grab the result, which is going to be how many IDs, or in this case, rows, we have inside our table. So we actually know how many products we have. And we're going to insert that inside a variable that we're going to call total_results. And the way we grab the data is simply by, again, referencing to the statement that we ran. And then we say we want to point to a fetch method, which is basically grabbing all the data from inside the database, but as a associative array. And then we're referencing to total, which is the one that we have up inside our query, in order to do so. You don't have to do as total in order to get this working, but it's just kind of a neat thing to show you that you can actually create a reference to something specific inside a query, and then later on actually reference it inside your code. So you don't need to have this total here as a reference inside this code here, but it's just kind of a neat way to do things. Basically, what this is going to give us, total results, if I were to actually echo this out inside my web page, is it's going to give me the total count of all the different products I have inside my database. So basically we have one piece of data up here. That is just the basic, how many products they want to show per page inside my pagination system. And then all of this code is basically just to figure out how many products do I have inside my database. And the next thing I want to do now that I have these two pieces of data is I can actually calculate how many pagination pages is required inside my pagination system in order to get this, how many tabs working inside my pagination system. Because we need to actually loop out the buttons and change the numbers from 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on how many pages you have. But in order to do that, we need to figure out how many tabs we actually need. So in order to calculate that, you basically just take the total number of products that we have inside our database, and we divide it by the number of results we want to show per page inside our pagination system. And when we calculate this, you'll notice that I did actually include another function inside this calculation here. So basically we have total pages pointing to a function called ceiling that has the calculation I just talked about. We divide this one by this one, right? To better explain this, I think I might change this to 10 just to make it a little bit easier for people to understand. Let's say I have 10 products that I want to show per page inside my pagination system, but inside my database, I have 15 products I need to show. If I divide 10 into 15, I'm going to get 1.5. Now we can't show 1.5 buttons inside our pagination system because that means 1.5 button. So I would need to actually show 2 buttons to show all the products inside my database, right? Because we need to round up to 2 because that's the number of buttons we need. So ceiling basically just rounds up to the next whole number. So if I were to get 1.5, that would actually give me 2. So it's important that we run this function here in order to get a whole number of pages we need to have inside our pagination system. That's why we run the ceiling function here. So with these 3 pieces of data, the next thing we need to figure out is what page we're inside of right now inside our pagination system, because that's also something we need to know inside when we create this system here. So if I'm inside page 2, I don't want to show product 1 to 10. I need to show product 11 to 15. Let's say I have 15 products inside my database. So we need to figure out what page we're inside of so we know which products to show inside that particular page. So to do that, we're going to go down to the next line here, and we're going to create a if-else statement. Basically, inside the if statement, we're going to say that we want to grab a URL parameter called page. So that is going to be what we do here. We go inside and we run a get method. Now, if we do not have a page set inside the URL, then we just want to set a default page, which is going to be page number 1. But if we do have a page inside the URL set equal to a certain page, then I want to create a variable called page and set that one equal to the page number. And I'm going to cast that one into an integer in order to get an actual integer data type. Which is something we can do inside programming. We can cast it into a certain data type, in this case, a integer data type, so we can calculate with it inside our code here. So basically, we're just saying, do we have a page inside the URL equal to something? If so, then grab that number. If we do not have it, then create a default page that is equal to 1. And we do actually have a shorthand way of creating this, which I will actually show you here. So we're just going to go and delete. Actually, we can just comment this out so you can actually still see it. If I were to comment this out, another way to actually write this would be like this. So we're basically just creating a variable called page, and we set it equal to a statement. In this case, we're checking for this statement here. And if that one actually exists, then we want to set page equal to this over here. And then we have the else statement at the back here that says, well, okay, so if this one is not actually going to return true, then create this value instead. So basically, this is the if statement, and this is the else statement. This is how you see people program later on. Instead of creating all these if-else statements and stuff like that, then you start creating one-liners like this in order to write the exact same code. So for the sake of this tutorial here, we're going to write it like this, and we will, I think, use it one more time inside this tutorial here. So the next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that when we grab this page number from inside the URL, that is actually a valid page range. Let's say I have 2 pages inside my pagination system, but inside the URL, the user, the evil user, goes inside the website, goes into the URL and writes 5. But there is no page number 5 because I don't have that many products. But he does it anyways, and he types enter. And all of a sudden, our code is going to throw error messages because, oh, there is no page 5. So what are we going to show, right? So we need to prevent that from happening. Same thing for -2, because we can't go into minus. I don't have minus pages inside my pagination system. So we need to have some code preventing the user from trying to mess up our system here. And the way we're going to do that is by writing this one-liner code down here. I think the easiest way to explain this is just by grabbing this method first and just showing that one first. Basically, we're taking 2 values and we're saying which one is the smallest. So in this case here, we were grabbing page, which is what is assigned to page. So let's say the current page number is 1, right? And then we have the number of total pages, which is 2 if I have 15 products inside my database. So basically this function here goes inside and prevents the user from writing something like 1,000 inside pages equal to inside the URL, because then it's going to default over to the number of total pages, because it cannot be higher than 2 pages. If I have 15 products inside my database and I'm dividing by 10, it's going to be 2 pages, right? So it cannot go higher than 2 pages with this function here. But what if the user goes in and writes minus something? Well, then we need to go out and also run a max function around these pieces of data here, where basically the first parameter is going to be 1, and the second one is going to be this function we just ran that is going to not allow the user to type something higher than the total number of pages. Because let's say the user actually went in and wrote -10, then it's going to say, well, okay, but that shouldn't be allowed because the number inside pages equal to should not be smaller than 1. If they write something smaller than 1, it's going to default to 1. I hope this makes sense, because basically we're just going in and saying we don't want the user to write a number higher than the total number of pages inside our pagination system inside the URL, but we also don't want to write something smaller than 1. And the last thing we need to do before we actually start grabbing the data from the database and showing it inside the website is we actually need to calculate where it needs to grab the data from. Like, what is the starting point inside our list of products? Because let's say I'm inside page 1 and I need to show 10 products. Then it should start at number 1 to 10, right? Actually, that is incorrect. It should start at number 0 to 9, because when we calculate inside programming, we always start counting at 0, right? Because that's just how we do things. So in order to show 10 products, it's from 0 to 9. That is going to be 10 in total. And let's say we're inside page number 2. Then we start counting at 10 to 19, because that is going to be the next 10 products. So basically we need to figure out the starting point. So inside page 2, the starting point would be 10. Inside page 3, the starting point would be 20. So we need to figure out where to start counting from inside the database when we grab 10 pieces of data that we need to show inside that particular page. So in order to get that, we do it by running this particular line of code. Basically, we say we want to write a variable called start from, and then we set it equal to the current page, or the current page number we calculated up here. We can actually combine these because they kind of go together. And then we say -1, because remember, if we're inside page number 1, we need to -1 in order to start counting from 0 inside the database, because that's, like I said, how we count inside programming. So this simple little way of just minusing by 1 is going to solve the whole issue of counting correctly inside the database. And then I want to multiply that by however many results per page I want to show inside this particular pagination system. Had the page number been 4, let's say I had that many products inside my database, then 4 minus 1 is going to be 3. And then 3 times 10 is going to be 30. So inside page number 4, inside my pagination system, is going to start grabbing products inside my database, counting from 30 inside the database. I hope that makes sense, because this is like the best way I can explain it. But basically, it's going to start grabbing our products from this particular starting point based on what page you're inside of right now inside the pagination system. So we don't grab product number 1 every single page. We need to start counting from the next group of products that needs to be shown. And then basically we do the exact same thing as we did above here. We run a prepared statement that queries the database. So we're going to go down below here. In this case here, we're running a select statement that says we want to grab all, which is what this symbol means, from our table called products, and we want to create a limit, because we don't want to grab all the products in the entire table, but we want to start grabbing from a certain point and then a certain number of products below that. So in this case here, we're going to do a start from and a results per page. And these two up here are references. So we're going to tell it what these numbers are further below. So we're going to say we want to actually prepare this statement, and then we want to bind a value for each of these references up here. So we want to start from a certain point, which is going to be our variable called start_from, which is the one we have up here, the last one we calculated. So if I'm inside page number 3, then -1 is 2. 2 times 10 is 20. So we want to start from product number 20 inside the database. And then we need to tell it how many products below we want to grab. In that case, it's just going to be results per page, which is the next one down here, which is the very first one we have up here. So we want to grab 10 products below that starting point and actually have that. We want to execute the statement and then bind that to a variable called products, which is going to be passed in as a associative array. So basically, it's just going to be a PHP array that allow for us to reference the product data using the column names. That is going to make sense in just a second. So if I wanted to grab our product name, I would just simply go down and reference to variable products, which is a array with all the data inside of it. I want to use these square brackets. And then I want to go in and say I want to grab name, because that is going to be the product name. If I want to grab the product price, then I just reference to price, because that particular name inside the double quotes is going to be our column name inside our database. So we have ID, name, price. Like those are the things we're referencing inside the square brackets down there. So let's go ahead and delete this last line of code here. And this is basically all the code for the pagination system in order to actually start showing the data inside our page. So what we can do now is we can go back inside our index page and just kind of adjust the code down here in order to actually show the actual database data instead of just like default static text like we have here. So the first thing I need to do is actually pass in or include the 2 different documents that we created over here, the database connection and the pagination system, at the very top of our index page in order to actually use the code from inside of them. So I'm going to go at the very top, I'm going to create our PHP tags. Now, because this is not a pure PHP document, we want to make sure we have the closing tag. And then we basically just go in and say we want to reference our database connection. And we also want to reference our pagination page. And the order here is very important, because first we need the connection and then we need the pagination code. Because in that order, inside our pagination file, we are actually using the variable connection. So we need to have that linked above this code here, which means that the order inside the index page is also the database connection first, and then the pagination system. If you switch these around, it's going to throw error messages. That's basically what I'm saying here. So the next thing you need to do is you want to make sure you actually change the data inside the table here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to run a for each loop inside our code, where basically we loop out the table rows depending on how many products we want to show inside this particular page inside our pagination system. And of course, that is going to be determined by, if I go back inside our pagination page here, by the results per page we have up here at the very top. So inside our index page, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this table row here. Then I'm going to create a PHP loop. And the way I'm going to do that is actually by using the opening and closing PHP tags 2 times. And just to not confuse anyone, me doing it this way is something that you'll see people do inside PHP. But basically, this is the exact same thing as this right here, at least right now, that we have no HTML in between the tags. It's just basically a way for me to write HTML code. Like if I were to write it like this, you can see that my text editor isn't really recognizing this as HTML. So I would actually have to echo this out inside quotation marks, like this is not really optimal when it comes to mixing PHP and HTML together. So instead, by opening and closing right after each line of PHP code here, I can just go in and write HTML without having to echo it out first. So this is the preferred way of doing things. So by running this for each loop, which we're using, because right now our products at the very bottom here is an array, and when we want to loop out array data, we use a for each loop. That is like a basic PHP thing, right? Whenever we want to loop out arrays, we use a for each loop. So basically we're going in and we want to say that we have a products variable, and I want to reference or create a reference called product. So whenever I go inside this loop here and reference to product, I'm referencing to the first loop iteration or the first array data inside products. So if I were to go inside the loop and say I want to, let's say product, again, square brackets, go inside here and grab name. And again, we would actually have to open and close our PHP tags here because of the way we're doing things. So we're going to open and close. Then we would actually get the name of our product. And then it's going to go to the next loop or the next array index, which is going to be the next one in line. And basically, if I were to echo this out, it's going to actually output the name of all my products, or at least the 10 products I'm looping out one by one inside my page here. So if we would actually save this, and now before we actually see this inside the browser, I just want to make sure we spell things correctly, Daniel, because inside my require ones up here, I want to make sure I'm linking to Pagination.php because that is the name of my file over here. So doing that, and then going inside my website, you can now see that we get ID, name, price, but above I'm getting product 1, product 2, product 3, product 4, product 5, and so on. But I'm getting 10 products. Notice that. So if I were to go inside the URL here and say I want to grab my index.php, and then I want to say question mark, page equal to 1, then you're going to notice we're still going to get product 1 to 10. But if I were to change this number up here to 2, we're now getting 11 through 18, because that is how many products I have inside my database. So apparently I have 18 products in total, but we're getting the next products or list of products depending on the page number inside my URL up here. And that is what we set up inside our code. Now, of course, right now it's not really looking correct because the headers are below and the products are above. And that's basically just because right now we don't actually have these output inside an actual table row. As you can see, we have table row and then we have table headers. These down here should also be table row, and then the data inside those table rows. So the way we would actually do this is inside the for each loop, we're going to write them like this. So basically we create an HTML table row, we open and close it, and then inside we create table data. And inside each of these table data, which we have 3 of, you can see we have an opening and a closing tag. Opening, closing tag. Inside of each of those, we're going to insert a PHP output where basically we're echoing out our product ID and then our product name, our product price. And you'll actually notice that I did actually include some other stuff in here, like some extra functions. I'll explain those. But we're basically just echoing out a piece of table data or 3 pieces of table data inside a row. Now, the HTML special characters function we have up inside the first 2 here are basically just something you need to do whenever you output any sort of data inside a website from a database in order to not have people create malicious code that gets run inside your website. So you just need to make sure whenever you output from a database that you include it inside HTML special characters, which is a PHP built-in function. And below here, we just basically output our price, but I run a function that goes in and formats the number to 2 decimal points. So if the price has like a bunch of decimal points behind it, I want to say that, well, okay, but does it only have 2 decimal points? And again, we can also include the HTML special characters here because again, we're grabbing it from a database. So just gonna go ahead and do that. Gonna make sure we have it closed off at the end here. So this is basically, just to zoom out so you can see everything, how to output the data inside our for each loop. If I were to actually go inside my web page and refresh, you can now see that we're getting IDs, we're getting names of the products and the prices. So now you may notice that we're missing one more thing in order to actually have this completely done inside our website, which is right now there's no buttons. Like we can't go to page 1, 2, so on. There's no previous, there's no next button. So those we have to create now inside our index page below our like the rows that we're actually outputting here. So below the table, we're going to create a div container, and the div is going to contain all the different buttons that we have inside this pagination system. So inside the div container, we're going to create 3 different types of buttons. We're going to create a previous button if we're not inside the first page. Then we're going to create all the different pages for inside the pagination system, depending on how many products we have inside our database. And then we're going to create a 3rd type of button, which is a next button that is going to be there if we're not on the last page inside this pagination system. Because if we're on the last page, you should not be able to go forward to another page because there is no other page to go forward to. So what we can do here is we can create our opening PHP code tags, and we're going to close it off directly after. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a if condition that is going to check for a certain thing. And we're actually going to go ahead and copy and delete the closing tag of this PHP code, because we want to close off our PHP code again right after the first curly bracket. And then we want to open the PHP code right before the closing curly bracket, because we want to do it in the exact same way as we did up here by opening the PHP and then closing it again, immediately after in order to write HTML in between. So the way we're going to do that is simply by doing it like this. So inside the if condition, we're going to check for a variable page, which is going to be equal to a certain page number inside this pagination system. And I want to check if it is greater than 1. So if we're not inside page 1, then show this button inside this particular if condition. So in this case here, I'm just going to create a regular anchor tag that is going to link to the previous page, so a page less that we're inside of right now. So inside the anchor tag, I'm basically going to say that the hyperreference, which is the link, is going to be equal to $page equal to, which is the URL link that is going to be up there. And I want to set it equal to the current page number -1, because I want to go back 1 page, right? So basically this is going to output the previous page inside our pagination system. And this little icon that you see over here, the what do you call it, the ampersand laqui, is basically just a way, like a Unicode for a certain symbol, which you can actually see inside my editor here. It is that particular symbol there. So we're just creating a back arrow, and then I write previous right after the back arrow. So basically this is just creating something very simple. If we were to actually show it here, you can see we get this previous button that has the little arrow that I'm actually creating in there. If I click this button, you can see right now my page number is 2, but then it's going to be 1. And then it disappears because now we're inside page 1, so it should not show anymore. Then I'm going to copy paste and paste this right below here. And this time I want to check if variable page is lesser than the total number of pages I should have available inside this pagination system. And where do we get that variable? Well, we get it from inside our pagination.php. So if I go up here, you can see we have total pages as a variable. That is the total number of pages we should have allowed inside this pagination system based on how many products we have inside the database. So I'm going to say I want to say that it has to be lesser than that particular number there. And if it is, then I want to show a next button. And in that case, it's going to look a little bit different. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste it here. It's going to look like this instead. So now we're just simply saying variable page, but instead of -1, we say +1. And then I create a next text with another symbol, which in this case is going to be a forward arrow, because just to show the user that you're moving forward inside these page systems here. So if I save this, go inside my website, refresh it, you can see, oh, we have a next button. If I click it, we go to the next page, and now we have a previous button. If I click this one, now we have a next button. And we can keep doing that back and forth, but basically just to show that this is actually working. So the next thing we need to have is the actual, numbers showing what page do you want to go to. And that is going to go in between what we have here. So it's going to go in between these two pieces of code. So basically, I'm just going to copy paste it in here. But in this case here, we're actually doing things a little bit different, because instead of a if condition, we're actually creating a for loop. And in this for loop here, we're basically just going in and looping out the number of buttons that we need inside our pagination system based on a certain number we have inside our pagination.php file. So inside the for loop, we create a variable I, which is equal to 1, because we need to have a starting point. So in this case, it's going to be page number 1. And as long as I is less than or equal to the total pages that we should have inside this pagination system, which is the same number we have that we use down here in the bottom one, then it should just continue to loop out a new button that has a new number, so to speak. And after each loop, we basically just want to add 1 to variable I. So basically we're just looping out page numbers until, oh, there's no more products inside the database. So now we're going to stop looping. And the button is going to look like this. So just to kind of explain what this does, because it's not too complex. So we're creating a anchor tag, and we're saying that the hyperreference, which is the link to this particular page, is going to be equal to variable I. So right now, if we're inside the first loop, then the page number is going to be equal to 1. If we're inside the second loop, it's going to be equal to page number 2. So we're basically just looping out buttons, and then we're saying that the button is actually going to be called also variable I. So the button is going to have number 1 inside of it. And we're just continuing to loop until we run out of pages that we can actually create, which we already calculated inside the pagination.php file. So if I save this, you'll notice going inside and refreshing that we have page number 1, 2, and then next. So if we click on page number 2, you can see we're inside page number 2, and our next button disappeared because we're inside the last page. Just to properly demonstrate this, because right now we have like 10 products per page, if we were to actually take that number and reduce it inside my pagination.php file, just to properly show this, let's say I want to have, 4 products per page. If I were to do that, we're going to have a lot more pages inside our pagination system. So when I refresh, you can see that now we have 5 pages because we have a lot less products per page. So if we go to page number 1, you can see that we have no previous button because it goes away. We can click on page number 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we have the last 2 products on the last page. So basically, we can just continue to, see all the different products or images or videos, whatever you might want to have inside this system here, in order to create this pagination system. So this is a very bare bone basic pagination system if you want to have this inside your website. I do want to point out that there is no CSS in this video here, because you can see my little demo here at the beginning did look a little bit different because there is CSS here. But because my subscribers specifically told me not to include CSS because it takes too long, it is something that is going to be included inside the lesson material for the supporters of this channel here, which will be linked inside the description. So if you want to have my personal notes here with all the CSS and comments for every line of code that explains what exactly things do, I'll have all my personal files here inside the description for all the people who want to support the channel. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this little lesson here, and I'll see you guys in the next one.